Imagine it is the middle of the night. You are dead asleep.
The deepest sleep possible, yeah.
Right, exactly. And suddenly, the smoke detector in your hallway just starts absolutely screaming.
Oh, that is the worst sound in the world.
It really is. You jolt out of bed. Your heart is just hammering against your ribs. You can, barely see straight. And you have exactly seconds to react.
The milliseconds, really, before panic sets in.
Exactly. And in that moment, you don't get to, ask the fire for a 5-minute warning.
Yeah, hold on a second. Fire, let me stretch.
Right. You don't get to do a quick set of jumping jacks to get your blood flowing, and you definitely don't get a practice run to remember your escape route.
No, reality doesn't give you a warm-up. You either know exactly what to do or you don't.
And that jarring, really uncomfortable reality is the focal point of what we are exploring today. So welcome to this deep dive.
Glad to be here for this one. It's a heavy topic.
It really is. Today, we are taking a hard look at a concept from high-stakes tactical training that, honestly, it completely upends everything we think we know about test preparation, practice, and what it actually means to be ready.
It really throws the whole traditional education model right out the window.
It totally does. Our sole focus today is this incredibly potent piece of source material. It's an article from ValorTech, written by a 30-year veteran firearms instructor named Herfel.
And that title, the title alone is just intense.
Yeah, it pulls no punches. It's called Your Next Gunfight Will Be Cold. Your Qualification Should Be Too.
Coming from someone with 3 decades of experience in law enforcement and firearms education, a premise like that carries an immense amount of weight.
Definitely.
He is pointing this massive spotlight at a fundamental flaw in how organizations and even individuals measure their own competence.
So the mission for our deep dive today is to explore that specific flaw. We are going to look at why practicing right before an evaluation might actually be one of the most dangerous things you can do.
Dangerous because it lies to you, yeah.
Exactly. And we'll see how testing your skills cold, meaning with zero preparation, is really the only true measure of readiness. Okay, let's unpack this.
Let's do it.
The core premise here is just a slap in the face. Basically, there's a 100% chance you will not be warmed up for your next critical incident.
Right, because think about the mechanics of a real-world confrontation. The threat does not politely tap you on the shoulder and offer you 10 practice rounds.
No, it's always when you least expect it.
Exactly. You don't get a quick coaching session to correct your stance. You don't get, 5 minutes to regulate your breathing and find your rhythm before things escalate.
Right. You might have just stepped out of a vehicle after a 4-hour drive.
Or you're walking out of a restaurant carrying heavy groceries.
Yeah, or like the fire alarm example, just waking up from deep sleep, your hands might be stiff from the cold.
Your baseline is always compromised in the real world.
Because of this absolute unpredictability, Herfel makes the argument that every serious range day, every true evaluation of skill, has to begin with a cold qualification.
And we should probably define what cold actually looks like mechanically, because it is uncompromising.
Yeah, break that down for us. What does cold mean here?
It doesn't mean skipping a few complex drills and just doing the basics. It means you arrive, you put on your equipment, you receive the course of fire, and you perform immediately.
No stretching. No checking your sights.
Nothing. Not after stretching, not after confirming your sights are aligned. Your very first draw matters. Your first sight picture matters. Your first trigger press matters.
Okay, let me push back on this for a second because my brain goes straight to how we are traditionally taught to learn.
Sure, the classic school model.
Right. Think about being in school. Taking a cold qualification feels like walking into a classroom and being handed a massive pop quiz the exact second your chair scoots in.
Instead of having that 10 minutes to cram or review your notes.
Exactly. Versus having 10 minutes to review your notes to jog your memory. Isn't repetition how the human brain actually learns?
It is, but there's a catch.
Why wouldn't an instructor want a shooter to take, say, 30 rounds to settle down, correct their grip, remember their fundamentals, and stop jerking the trigger before they get tested? Doesn't punishing them before they are settled just defeat the purpose of training?
What's fascinating here is the distinction between learning a skill and evaluating readiness.
Okay, learning versus evaluating.
Right. If we look at the neurology of it, think of a physical skill like drawing a firearm and firing accurately as a trail in the woods.
A trail in the woods, got it.
When you first learn it, you are hacking through thick brush. It's hard. But as you practice over years, that trail becomes a smoothly paved highway.
Because of the repetition.
Exactly. But here is the catch. If you don't walk that path constantly, The woods start to overgrow again. The brush creeps back in.
Oh, I see. So a warm-up is basically taking a machete to that overgrown trail right before the test begins.
That is a perfect way to visualize it. Herfel isn't saying warm-ups have absolutely no place in training.
They aren't useless then.
Not at all. Warm-up rounds have a very clear diagnostic purpose during the learning phase. They help instructors isolate mechanical problems, they prepare the body, and they introduce the objectives for the day.
Right, but the evaluation is different.
Yes. His critical argument is that the machete should never come out before the initial evaluation. If you clear the brush first, you are no longer measuring the true state of the trail.
Meaning you aren't measuring readiness anymore. You are measuring recent rehearsal.
Exactly. When you give a shooter unlimited practice before their qualification, the final score doesn't measure if they're ready for a sudden real-world threat.
It just measures how good they are at taking tests.
Right. It only measures how well they perform after being perfectly primed for a test. A shooter might need 30 rounds to settle down, fix their grip, and dial in their focus.
And then on the 31st round,
On the 31st round, they might produce a beautiful, tightly grouped target. But that target is lying.
wow, the target is lying. That is such a powerful way to frame it.
It really forces you to rethink what a good score even means.
It totally does. The target hides the truth of what would have happened in those first crucial seconds of an actual confrontation.
Because in a violent, sudden confrontation, the first rounds dictate whether you live or die.
You don't get 30 practice shots at the bad guy.
Exactly. So if your first 30 rounds on the range are terrible because your trail was overgrown, and you only shoot well on round 30, well, in reality, round 31 is far too late.
The fight is over by then.
The incident ended at round 3. The warm-up completely hides that critical truth from both the student and the instructor.
Man, this brings up a massive question for me about the physical body. If we take away that warm-up, what actually happens to the shooter?
Oh, the physiology is wild.
Like, what is the physiology of going cold that makes those first few rounds so universally terrible for people who aren't practicing constantly?
This is where we have to look at the sympathetic nervous system. When you are thrust into a sudden test, even a simulated one, you experience a massive adrenaline dump.
The classic fight or flight response.
Exactly. Your body floods with cortisol, and the first casualty of that chemical cocktail is your fine motor skills.
Wait, really? Fine motor skills go first?
Almost instantly. Gross motor skills like running or throwing a punch, those are preserved. But fine motor skills like the minute pressure required to smoothly pull a trigger without moving the barrel of the gun, those degrade immediately.
I've always wondered about that mechanism. So the brain is essentially rerouting resources away from your fingertips because it thinks you need to run from a bear.
That is the exact evolutionary mechanism. Blood pulls away from the extremities and into the core to protect your vital organs.
Wow. Which is great for survival, but terrible for shooting.
Terribly bad. That shift changes your proprioception, which is your body's ability to sense movement, action, and location. Suddenly, the gun feels different in your hands.
Because your nerves are literally offline.
Right. Your grip pressure becomes wildly inconsistent because your brain just isn't receiving the same feedback from your nerve endings.
And what about visually? You mentioned earlier that the first sight picture matters. Does the adrenaline dump affect these eyes too?
Dramatically. The physiological startle response causes your pupils to dilate.
To let in more light.
Yeah, letting in more light to spot threats, but it destroys your ability to focus on near objects. You get intense tunnel vision.
So you can't even see the sights on your gun.
Exactly. If you haven't ingrained the muscle memory of finding your front sight to the point of subconscious competence, your brain simply won't let you see it when you are startled.
You just stare past it.
You will end up staring past the gun at the target, which completely ruins your accuracy.
No wonder people hate doing this. When you are fighting your own biology on top of your lack of practice, the results have to be ugly.
It's a brutal reality check.
The source text mentions that shooters absolutely loathe cold qualifications, primarily because it completely strips away all their favorite excuses.
Oh, the excuses are legendary.
You hear things like, my hands were stiff today, or the gun felt different, or my personal favorite, I normally shoot better than this.
I normally shoot better than this is the classic defense mechanism of cognitive dissonance.
It's just ego protection.
100%.
Ah.
The shooter holds an internal belief that they are a highly proficient expert. Then, the cold target presents undeniable visual evidence that they are currently incompetent.
And the brain just cannot handle that gap.
The brain hates that friction so it immediately generates excuses to protect the ego. But Herfield's response to that is brilliant in its simplicity.
What does he say?
He says the target records what actually happened, not what normally happens.
Here's where it gets really interesting to me. There is this massive tension between the shooter's fragile ego and the stark reality of the target.
It's a very delicate balance.
If cold qualifications make experienced people look bad and completely strip away their excuses, how does an instructor prevent this from just becoming a public spectacle?
That's the real trick of good instruction.
Because it seems like it could easily turn into something that just humiliates the student, makes them defensive, and ruins their ability to learn for the rest of the day.
That is a crucial dynamic, and it really comes down to the psychology of instruction. The expert instructor knows that the goal of a cold qualification is absolutely not humiliation.
Right, you don't want to just crush their spirit.
No, a poor performance shouldn't be a public spectacle where the class laughs at the veteran who missed the target. It should immediately become a personalized training priority.
A priority, not a punishment.
Exactly. The responsible instructor doesn't use that cold score to ridicule. They use it as a completely objective diagnostic tool to figure out exactly what needs to be corrected, strengthened, or entirely rebuilt.
So it's about shifting the perspective from you failed and you should be embarrassed to here's the undeniable data on where your skills are right this second.
Precisely. It is intended to protect the shooter, and what it protects them from is false confidence.
False confidence can be deadly.
One of the most dangerous combinations you can possibly have in a high-stakes environment is high confidence supported by outdated ability.
Oh man, outdated ability, that's a great phrase.
The shooter remembers their best score from a heavily coached class 6 months ago. They feel incredibly confident walking the streets.
But they haven't practiced since.
Right. But the threat they face tomorrow does not care what they scored last year after a 50-round warm-up. The cold qualification forces them to confront what they can do right now, without assistance, rehearsal, or excuses.
The responsible shooter doesn't argue with the target. They study it.
That's exactly the mindset you need.
I love that line. It reframes the whole experience. Instead of a punishment, the cold qualification is a mirror. But that individual ego is really just the tip of the iceberg, right?
Unfortunately, yes.
Yeah.
It gets much bigger.
If individual shooters are lying to themselves through cognitive dissonance, it makes me wonder how training academies actually measure success. Are they just ignoring the cold targets to keep their pass rates high?
This is where the issue moves from a personal training flaw to a massive systemic danger.
Because the whole system is built on this.
Yeah. Bureaucracies have a very different set of priorities than individual survival.
Herfeld gets incredibly critical of how many organizations handle these qualifications. He points out that too many of them treat qualifications as a mere administrative requirement.
Just check in boxes.
It's essentially a bureaucratic checkbox to limit liability. You show up, you are allowed to fire practice rounds, you reach whatever the minimum mandated score is, you sign the form, and you go home.
And the danger there is that passing a minimum standard, especially after being allowed to clear the brush on that neural pathway with warm-up rounds, does not create combat-ready personnel.
It definitely doesn't.
Or responsible armed professionals, for that matter. It just creates certified shooters and, as the article devastatingly calls it, attractive paperwork.
Ouch! Attractive paperwork. That is a stinging critique.
But it's so accurate.
It really is. It's measuring the shooter under the easiest possible conditions just to get a pass on paper so the department can say they did their job. So what does this all mean?
It means we're dealing with a dangerous illusion.
The image that comes to my mind is giving out driver's licenses to people who can only parallel park perfectly after they've practiced it 10 times in an empty lot with brightly colored cones.
Yes. Perfect analogy.
And then the DMV gives them a stamp of approval, and we act completely shocked when they immediately crash the moment they are thrust into unpredictable rush hour traffic.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, that analogy perfectly captures the mechanism of the failure. The parallel parking test with cones evaluates a rehearsed sequence under sterile conditions.
While rush hour traffic is completely chaotic.
Exactly. Rush hour traffic evaluates dynamic decision-making under stress. If an organization wants genuine improvement, if they actually care about operational readiness rather than just administrative compliance, they have to demand evidence of the latter.
They need cold data.
And without a cold baseline, there is absolutely no proof of genuine improvement.
Because if you don't know where the student actually started that morning, if you didn't see them hit the cones on their first attempt, How do you know if your coaching actually taught them anything new, or if they just eventually remembered what they already knew?
You don't. The instructor might believe the class improved because everyone is smiling.
Everyone feels good about themselves.
Right, the shooters might feel great and think they leveled up. The final targets at the end of the day might look much cleaner. But without that initial cold score, it is all just speculation.
There's no actual baseline to compare it to.
What actually changed? By how much? Under what specific conditions? To prove scientifically that the training worked, an instructor has to compare the cold start performance against the end-of-day evaluation.
Otherwise, as Herfel so perfectly puts it, everything else is just ammunition consumption with motivational speeches.
That is such a brilliant way to phrase it.
If you aren't tracking improvement from a brutal, honest baseline, you are just making noise, burning through budget, and giving people a false sense of security.
A serious program has to evaluate far more than just a pass or fail metric on a minimum standard, because minimum scores create minimum shooters.
Which is terrifying when lives are on the line.
Exactly. A real evaluation needs to examine the nuances, things like accuracy under time pressure, consistency of draw stroke, shot accountability, how well they manipulate their equipment when their fine motor skills are gone.
And their mental state too, right?
Yes. Their decision-making when the physiological startle response kicks in. And crucially, it needs to look at performance degradation under increasing complexity.
All of that evaluation has to begin with the cold qualification. The real training only begins after the cold reality is exposed.
The purpose is not to protect an instructor's pass rate or to make the academy look flawless on a spreadsheet.
Right, it's not a PR exercise.
It is not to make sure everyone leaves the range feeling validated and happy. The purpose is to build people who can perform responsibly when performance actually matters.
It demands total honesty. The cold qualification shows the shooter before the coaching, before the repetitions, before the corrections, and before the confidence boost.
It is the actual, unvarnished starting point.
At places that take this seriously, like Valortech, the goal is to force shooters to understand their actual baseline performance, so they become deeply accountable for every single round they might one day be forced to fire under stress.
It strips away all the illusions.
It is incredibly sobering when you look at the physiological and psychological mechanisms behind it all. And as we wrap up this deep dive, I want to bring this directly back to you, the listener.
Because this isn't just about guns.
Not all. Even if you are not in law enforcement, even if you never plan on preparing for a tactical scenario involving firearms, the core philosophy of cold readiness is deeply applicable to your own life.
The underlying psychology and neurobiology here applies to almost any high-pressure scenario where humans are forced to perform.
And it's just human nature.
Exactly. State-dependent memory and the degradation of fine motor skills under cortisol are universal human traits.
Think about the arenas in your own life. Whether it is delivering a high-stakes presentation to a hostile boardroom, responding to a medical emergency with your child in your home, or utilizing any complex perishable skill you've spent years acquiring.
The stakes might be different, but the brain reacts the same way.
Right. The truest measure of your ability is not what you can do after an hour of calm rehearsing in front of a mirror with a cup of coffee. It is what you can do the very moment you are called upon, completely without warning, when your heart rate spikes to 140 beats per minute.
This raises an important question for anyone evaluating their own skills. Are you measuring your peak performance under ideal conditions and pretending that is your baseline?
A lot of us do that.
We all do. Or are you honest about your baseline performance under the absolute worst conditions? Because the latter is the ultimate test of true competence.
So I want to leave you with a final thought to mull over today. If, as this veteran instructor argues, minimum scores create minimum shooters, and if allowing warm-ups creates a highly dangerous illusion of competence,
The implications are massive.
they really are. How many other critical systems in our society are currently relying on those exact same warmed-up minimum certifications?
That's a scary thought.
Think about corporate crisis management teams running scheduled, highly choreographed tabletop exercises. Think about disaster relief logistics passing inspections they knew about months in advance.
Everyone's prepared for the test, but not the disaster.
Exactly. How many massive societal systems are propped up by attractive paperwork that would completely fall apart the moment an actual, unannounced, cold reality hits?
When the brush hasn't been cleared for them.
Just like waking up to that screaming fire alarm in the dead of night. The world doesn't care how well you perform after you've had time to clear the brush and prepare. It only cares what you can do right now.